I'm so sorry I was muted. Good morning and welcome. As most of you may know me, I'm Carol. Nice to meet you all. I'm here from Sunset Learning Institute. I'm from the marketing department. I'm here just to tell you that we will start our session in a couple of minutes, okay? Please hang in there, stay tuned with us. As you all may know, this month is October, so Cybersecurity Awareness Month. We will talk about it in the end of the session, but I will give you some spoilers. We have this month a lot of good offerings, promos, and everything here at Sunset. You can check in our landing page in our website, Cybersecurity Awareness Month. We do have a quiz for you to test your knowledge, and also you can obtain an Amazon gift card. Also, we are doing a Cisco giveaway this month, so you will be able to participate and be eligible to win a Cisco course of your choice.
There we are. My apologies, everyone. Some minor glitches to kick things off, but we got a fun-filled hour, and I'll make sure that we deliver some value here. But I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us today in this Cloud Zero Trust Security. And this webinar itself is focusing on zero trust, And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the term itself, and you probably maybe try to implement what you consider to be zero trust. So we'll talk about what that is and how that enhances cloud security in particular. Now, I do like to nudge everybody to make sure that everybody can participate and get the most out of this. While this is a webinar, that means this is a one-way broadcast. You won't be able to use your microphone. So let's do this. Everyone, find the chat functionality. I believe some of you already located it. And if you don't mind, share where you hail from. So as an example, I'll post here. My hometown from my base where I was stationed at before was North Carolina. So if you don't mind, please go ahead and share where you hail from. Oh, Jonathan, you're North Carolina. Amazing. Home of the 82nd Airborne. All right, I see some Fairfax, Virginia. All right, some Texas. Excellent. Okay. Rockford, Illinois. Good, good, good. All right. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. That was amazing. And I know my co-host didn't share that yet, but I believe she's in Brazil. All right. So Anna will share eventually. All right. So thank you, everyone. That way we kind of get the, kick things off. I always say we always need an icebreaker to make us all more approachable. This way we can engage more. All right. So in this current presentation, we're going to explore the concept of zero trust security. So again, exploring the concepts helps us understand how we can then go back in our Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure Cloud, Google Cloud, and other cloud computing environments and try to implement these strategies. So you have to understand these concepts in order to find, let's say, some standard or regulatory control that you want to implement to what? Adhere to zero trust. So remember, this is the concepts. Still need to learn how to do it, right? Okay. So you can see our outline for today, understanding zero trust, the role of multi-factor, more of that later, implementing it in cloud environments, advanced techniques and innovations in MFA, and impact on security and end user experience. You're probably wondering, zero trust or MFA, or is it zero trust and MFA? So we'll learn what that means in a moment. So zero trust is not just a model, it's also a philosophy. And it assumes that the network and devices have all been compromised. I think you guys are going to leave today's session with this concern or paranoia, I always say. I hope that it's a good paranoia, not anxiety, right? Which is kind of a negative form. But it focuses on, this is important, verifying identities, comma, assessing risk, comma. I know. You're like, you don't need to say the comma. I want to make sure that you understand these are all separate. Again, verifying identities, assessing risk, and securing access. And zero trust has several key components, which include above the network segmentation, identity, and access management. We can't forget continuous monitoring. So let's take a look at some of what I call the key tenets or core tenets to a zero trust methodology. So the core principles are the following. It's ready? Never trust, always verify. Think about that for a moment. Never trust, always verify. Essentially, in order for us to allow a request to move to another stage in whatever process, we have to what? Always verify. This means that access to a resource should be granted based on your principle. Now I'm going to take that word principle based on what? Your role. Your role. And that role should adhere to the principle of least privilege. I think a lot of us here are familiar with at minimum the principle of least privilege, right? Ensuring that access to resource is granted based on what? The minimum level of access. How many of us work in organizations today where we find a little bit too late that a lot of other members that don't need certain privileges have been granted that? Right? And this may cause us to consider that some of our current losses may be due to insider risks. But the nature of a principle of least privilege is really to reduce the risk of unauthorized access because of overprivileged identities. Now, this doesn't go without saying that we're going to verify what access you should have every time you make a request and ensure that least privilege is done once. It's continuous. So a lot of us, when we hear continuous verification, we start to think that this impacts innovation while it does help with security. But we're always trying to kind of juggle, right? We're trying to balance things out. A lot of us that are in the cybersecurity arena, so to speak, we believe in end-to-end security and privacy at the risk of innovation. But we've learned that we can't jeopardize the very innovation that we can also use to improve our security. So we need a balance. So while we're here advocating for continuous verification, this should reduce the risk, but not what? Impact innovation. We still are advocating strong authentication and encryption, but these are kind of like the bedrock, right? It's like the bedrock, right? Zero trust still emphasizes strong authentication and encryption. So are we saying in lieu of replace encryption? No. So we're still what? Utilizing great strategies like what? Defense in depth. To my good friend from North Carolina, where I mentioned home of the 82nd, right? So defense in depth, it's a military strategy. So yeah, multiple layers. So are we saying zero trust does not require network segmentation? Are we indicating that zero trust doesn't require encryption? Of course it does. Multiple layers of defense are still embedded into zero trust. Zero trust builds on a defense in depth layered approach. So, what are the key components and architecture when we consider zero trust in cloud, where a lot of the technologies that we're providing near real time performance are what? In the edge, aren't they? Right? A lot of our clouds are giving us at the edge. You get to use this technology to give you near real time. But here it is. If it's at the edge, that means it's not inside a what? Second or third private subnetwork within your virtual network. So if it's in the edge, then one would say the first control plane would be your identity and access management. So zero trust has several components, and that does include identity and access management. What we might refer to as IAM, or some of you have experience with some traditional identity access management technologies. I think a lot of you have heard of Active Directory, right? So another IAM, right? But nevertheless, zero trust focuses on what? Verifying explicitly. So what does that mean? Well, think about it. If I take the inverse of the word explicit, then I think I would focus on the word implicit, meaning by default. So if I use a device that has been trusted, think about what I just said, on a network through logging in, some would say, I'm implicitly verified. Therefore, trust me because I'm using that secure device. But zero trust throws that out of the window and says, what if that device has been compromised? Should we not verify explicitly? So, verifying explicitly will require identify users, groups, and devices before granting access. And let me add to this first paragraph and say explicitly. So it's not so much that I've already verified when you logged in. No, I needed what? A second form of verification. Now, I want you to consider those key words that I elected to use. A second form. Let me change the word. Factor. A second factor of authentication. While network segmentation is still required, what? Defense in depth is still needed. So network segmentation is still a key component, even in zero trust, while promoting the principle of least privilege. We're still what? Limiting access to what's considered sensitive or resources to only those users and devices that require based on least privilege, but every time there's a request for an additional what? Subnetwork or for additional what? Directory path within an operating system, we need to what? Verify yet again explicitly and continuously. So, what are the benefits? And there are challenges. There's pros and cons, right? There's pros and cons to everything if you think about it. So, Zero Trust provides benefits, including enhanced, ready, security posture. In other words, as you implement Zero Trust slowly but surely, logically, hence slowly, you will improve your posture because there should be a numerical representation of where you're at in terms of following security best practices that have been well documented and used in frameworks to improve and by design establish well architected frameworks. And as a multi-cloud instructor for Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, they all leverage well architected frameworks. So, what am I saying? In order for us to improve our security posture, there should be some global standards, not a best practice implemented by your security lead or your IT manager based on what they believe to be secure, because that is purely hearsay and subjective. But a global standard where other organizations like yourself, which have been leveraged in cloud computing, where we can look at compliance standards from NIST, from ISO, from SOC, to ensure that when we look at a control ID and we implement that control, that we are improving a numerical representation that will definitively denote if your company is actually improving or not. So Zero Trust requires adherence to regulatory standards. It's being objective. Furthermore, reducing risk. Zero Trust reduces risk by limiting access to sensitive data. But here's the question that I ask when I have those come to Google classes or Amazon or Microsoft and those that use Cisco. How can you reduce access to sensitive information types if you yourself have not categorized and classified data that is sensitive? So are we to assume that you know that that data is deemed sensitive? I believe that goes back to hearsay yet again. So anytime you want to reduce access to sensitive data, you have to consider that you need technologies and governance to ensure that you are able to classify it. So I have these questions that I ask, and then I dialogue with a lot of Cisco administrators and Microsoft and Amazon and Google. And that is, do you have a purview of data and how it's being accessed? And a lot of times I get the response, and I'm sure a lot of us will either agree or disagree with this. And that is, that's not my job. I don't have to manage data. I'm managing the network. Well, then the question is raises yet again, then how can you limit access to sensitive data if you don't know the data that you are trying to protect? Increased visibility. Zero Trust provides increased visibility by monitoring. So whatever monitoring technology that you're using, is that monitoring technology able to provide you real-time identification, and can it be able to provide you, the person monitoring, with information enough to act on potential behavior, potential requests, if you will, that can be highly probable malicious behavior. So with the rise of artificial intelligence, does your cloud provider and the technology that you're using augment your ability to identify behavior, while we call it anomalous, that behavior that might be malicious in intent? There are challenges. Like any new security paradigm, it's the complexity of trying to integrate that particular technology with what? And here it is, legacy technology. Notice I didn't say systems because that's what it boils down to. What if the challenge that you're facing in rolling out or adopting zero trust and the verify explicitly, you in meetings with your chief executives, with your IT staff, cannot compromise on implementing a new technology that helps, again, defend and protect privacy in this modern landscape. Have you ever encountered those challenges where you find yourself where you can't implement a particular security best practice because of your legacy technology? Have you ever found yourself trying to implement a technology that builds on defense in depth with your networking technology, but you can't because of the legacy tech? So consider, sometimes we have to reconsider the decisions we've made with the technology choices that we have because maybe they're not capable of integrating. So, what is the role of MFA? I think I've been leading you to this point where I mentioned something about the edge, that while I have a device that may be trusted, it could be compromised. And I've mentioned that we have to not just verify implicitly by default by logging into a device, we have to have a second factor. And I think a lot of us have experience over a decade, right? I'm sure Mark, Mir, Nike, Norman, Oscar, Paul, Rhonda, Wendell, and everyone else. You've heard of two-factor authentication. I'm sure a lot of us have. Now, the reason that most organizations may have not what? Seen the value of multi-factor is because of the way that they are what? Integrating or implementing this in their what? Zero trust model. Or maybe they don't quite understand the role of MFA. So everyone, I'm sure here is aware that multi-factor authentication is a process that requires users to provide what? Two or more factors to access a resource. And there's different types of authentication factors. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of something. Oh, you know what? Let me stop and nudge you. Ready? Ooh, quiz. I'm going to ask of the different types of authentication factors, and I want you to use your chat and post in the chat what type of physical or something that's not tangible, digital, that you can provide that would correlate with the next words that I choose. Ready? Here we go. So let's start off with the first and the most simple, and that is something you know. All right, use the chat and post what would be something you know. We use it every day. You got it, Norman. Username and password is something you know. That's right. Now, let's stay there just for a moment. Consider that we've been looking for methods to be passwordless. I'm sure a lot of you may have heard of that too, right? Where someone doesn't provide a password, but you log in without that password using other factors. But I want you to remember that in a zero trust model, multi-factor is always, with the word multi, 2 or more. So what if we're passwordless and we only provide one form of identification? That goes back to not being multi-factor. So consider, while we may have found something better than password, that is not an option that adheres with zero trust. Zero trust still requires 2 or more. I know a lot of us have faced challenges, right? David, I don't want to put in my password and something else. Well, that is zero trust. So now let's think of one more question. Something you have. Now, using the chat, what would be something you have? Come on, there's all kinds of options out there. Someone using the chat, provide me something you have. Armand, I see a token, yet software or hardware. PID card, Paul. Awesome, awesome. That's right. Phone, email. Yeah. No, we use a phone to receive a code. Excellent, excellent. Good, good. SMS. I love it. I love it. Keep it coming. Excellent. So everyone understands that having one form or factor isn't enough to adhere to zero trust. You need 2 or more. All right. So the importance of MFA in zero trust. Do you remember the verify explicitly? All right. So those core tenets that we mentioned at the start of this session, they actually align with MFA. That's right. The first was what? Verify explicitly. Remember that? Okay, I'll go back to that slide and just circle it out. Never trust, always verify. This is the verify explicitly, that right there. And that aligns with MFA. Okay. All right, let's go back to that other slide. Okay. So, MFA is critical. Again, I repeat, it is critical for zero trust as it provides that what? Ready? Additional layer. That additional layer of security. Beyond passwords, MFA helps to verify the identity of the user and enhances the security posture. Okay. So implementing MFA in what? Cloud environments. So even implementing MFA in cloud possesses several challenges, such as integrating with what? Ready? Legacy technology. What about user resistance? Cost. Now, there are best practices that can help to overcome these challenges, such as what? Cloud-based MFA solutions, implementing MFA in a phased approach and providing education, which is what? Skilling. Skilling and awareness are key. So again, some of the challenges, integrating with legacy systems, user resistance, access control considerations. So let's focus on the access control. So there's various cloud environments, from Google Cloud and their IAM to AWS and their IAM, or Microsoft Azure and their IAM known as Microsoft Entra ID. In cloud, it always requires additional considerations For what? Access control, such as now, oh, I love this question. Securing APIs. Wait a moment. I'll stop there for a moment. Just a nudge, and I'll call your names to ask you questions to get you to participate. Ready? So, can you give me an example in a cloud of an API? And Mark too. Some examples of an API in the cloud. Anyone else? Some APIs, someone help Paul and Mark out. Some what? Examples of APIs. Okay. So Mark posted Splunk server to client. So think about it, client to server communication. Jonathan, I love what Jonathan posted. Excellent. Okay, so Mark, the client to server communication, that wouldn't be access, that wouldn't be an API. Jonathan, the get request, a get request an API. So in cloud, the APIs are the following. Listen carefully. Oh, I understand, Mark. It's okay. So consider this. Everything in the cloud, everyone, is a public API. Ooh, that sounds scary. Did everybody hear that? I just said a public API. I did not say, however, that you have been authenticated and authorized a particular action in that get request, right, Jonathan? When you're performing that request. So if I log in going through multi-factor authentication into a management console, Google Cloud Management Console, Amazon Web Services Management Console. If I go to Microsoft Azure's portal and I use any of the various dashboards, when you got it, Armand, thank you for stealing others. So if I log in, that's an HTTPS request. That's a get. If let's say I don't go into the management console, everyone. I don't go to AKA what non-API users call websites. I don't go to a website. I don't make an HTTP or HTTPS call, right? Let's say I use a command line tool, all right? And I downloaded and I installed this command line tool because I want to use my familiarity with the command line on Linux Bash shell with maybe Amazon CLI, or maybe I want to use Microsoft Azure and I want to download their command line. Yeah, they have a CLI too, and it supports Bash and Microsoft PowerShell. So if I even use those command line tools and I provide my credentials, whether it's in a file, in a folder on my local machine, through some remote, right? A remote tool that allows me to make a request to use my credential, I am making an API call even with that command line to the cloud. Why? Because I have to make a call to an API endpoint. If I'm a developer, I'm sure everybody sees where I'm going to with this. So it's important. Everyone here, if you're working on premises and you're not working in the cloud, while this is a what? Cloud centric, it is zero trust in the cloud. If you're not familiar with cloud APIs, it is imperative that you go out and get skilling on it. Why? Because then hearing about MFA is really not going to make what? An impact into it being valuable to you. But when you understand that there's more than on-premise Cisco networks, but it extends into the cloud across telecommunication carriers like AT&T and Verizon, when you figure it out that the cloud is yet another network and yet another challenge that we have to secure, then implementing MFA becomes critical. When it's not because you're not aware, then that's because of lack of skilling. So yes, imagine APIs are everywhere. I just told you, you go to the website, you're making an API call. You're in the command line, you're making an API call. Wait, I teach developer courses and I'm a data scientist, meaning if I use Python on my MacBook, on my Linux, it doesn't matter the client that you're using to make a call to the what? Server APIs. It is an API call. So that means if I download a Python package with a software developer kit from Amazon or Google or from Microsoft, I still have to make an API call? Yes. That is why I stopped to focus on access control and APIs, because it's not just Mark. There are a lot of technicians out there that are not aware of what an API is and how to secure it. So it's imperative that you understand the first line of defense to that API request in a client and server model. Now I'm bringing it back to what? The basics. I didn't get to properly introduce my skill set. I've been in the forefront of technology, gentlemen, since the 90s. So I started off with Cisco. The cloud is just another network, but you have to learn how to what? Protect what we call the servers, which are now what? Other technologies in the cloud. So if you haven't gone into the cloud to provide protection, I humbly recommend that you consider getting on a project so you can learn it. Don't shy away from it. Embrace it. Learn how to secure it. It's yet another network. All right. So cloud-based MFA solutions. Using those solutions can simplify the deployment. Think about this. Do you know how many organizations from healthcare industry, financial sector, they will implement a hardware-based MFA solution using in the cloud a server because they have yet to trust using the cloud leaders like Microsoft Azure, like Amazon Web Services, like Google Cloud MFA. The reason the cloud is providing you their MFA is so that way you don't have to deploy multiple servers and then architect them to be highly available. They're simplifying the architecture of the MFA hardware for you, so you focus on what's important, which is which is that you find a way to what? Roll out your zero trust strategy, announce to others, skill, prepare them. Why? Have you ever tried to roll out? That's right, Mark, policy. Have you ever tried to roll out MFA and not tell anybody? Listen, it is not an email server, listen to this, migration over the weekend, and then on Monday, you start to provide support. No, you can't treat rolling out MFA like you're migrating from one server to another. You can't treat rolling out MFA like rolling out one Cisco CSR to replace another Cisco CS. No, it is far more complex and it takes time. So why do you want to focus on rolling out a hardware solution where the cloud is giving you the capability that you're trying to get from the hardware solution, which is what? Additional factors of authentication. So it should be a phased approach. And you should allow for testing. Here's an example. How many of you this year have experienced the issues with MFA where certain technology leaders have what? Enforced MFA. And you had to what? And you had to find a way to provide what? Damage control, right? Have discussions. So have the ability to test and fine tune with small pilot groups before you implement MFA to an entire department, division. And remember, Other key management service technologies, KMS. Remember, that is not multi-factor authentication. That is encryption keys. That is certificates, right? Those are different types of services. While those are great to roll out, don't forget that you should treat rolling out MFA just like you were to treat, think about this, rolling out a strategy for public and private key infrastructure. Think about your PKI infrastructure rollout. How long did it take? A while, didn't it? But why is it that we don't have the same approach when it comes to MFA? Something to consider, right? Now, I always say you have to have some scenario, somewhat case studies to help us truly understand what is the successful MFA implementation. So let's think about healthcare and then financial. Healthcare providers implemented, and I'll tell you who it is at the end of this webinar, because I've helped healthcare providers by joining their team to help them in their zero trust and other implementations, but more on that later. But the healthcare providers I'll mention at the end of this webinar have provided and implemented MFA to secure access to, ready, patient data. But think about this. Sensitive patient data. One would assume, well, it's a healthcare, so they don't have to govern, to classify the data of sensitive information types. No, that's wrong. They had to do that too, because not all of their data is actually deemed sensitive patient data. So the task of governing what's deemed sensitive, even in healthcare, is not something as simple as saying, hey, David, all their data is sensitive, so we should treat all their data the same. No. Ensuring that only authorized personnel can access it. Think about it. Think about how complex in a healthcare industry it is to govern data distributed by different types of systems that don't all integrate natively. That sounds challenging. And think about the different IT teams, where some IT teams have not embraced cloud, that they're resistant. Think about the challenges. And then trying to eventually provide oversight and grant least privilege principle, the strategy, to certain users when they start to provide access to data that may be deemed sensitive to specific individuals. It sounds very perplexing, right? Now, think about the financial sector. To protect against different types of attacks. Account takeovers is not just some television program, it's a type of attack. So how do we protect against these API calls where someone's trying to perform a particular action, which that action, that request is a get, a put, a post. Think about that. They're all requests, aren't they? And do you notice there's a lot of correlation between these two case studies? Here, I'm going to underline some key things. Sensitive, sensitive. Data, information is data. And ensuring that only authorized access. Authorized access. Do you see those keywords? So, zero trust is aimed to help us improve security postures because of these types of scenarios. All right. Forward. So there are some advanced techniques in MFA. a lot of us are aware that we can use biometrics. How many of you, and this is a form of biometric, we just don't say it anymore. We just call it something else. How many of you are using something you possess, where that something you possess is using biometrics, whether it's a fingerprint or it is facial recognition? How many of you? Show of hands, or maybe throw a one in the chat window. Armands, yes? I have to use facial recognition always. Yeah, listen, initially, I was not happy. I had to keep grabbing my phone. Matter of fact, guess what the challenge I had today, where I was several minutes tardy? I could not, right, verify the second form of authentication. And it was because of biometrics on a second device. And guess what? There were other factors. Are they ready? Conditions where that other device did not meet certain requirements. So I could not use that device. Right? Something now for me to consider later on and say, I can't use that device in presentations. Maybe talk to my IT team to find out what can I do better for that device to improve its security. So then that way, in terms of zero trust, remember defense in depth, maybe there's something that should, in addition, be encrypted that's not. But again, if I didn't have that second factor of authentication, I would have ended up using that device. What if that device had something that was compromised? Right? And do you have what we call adaptive? Adaptive methods are another innovation in MFA. Adaptive authentication methods, listen carefully, use risk-based authentication. So let me ask everyone here, is your current MFA able to use adaptive, meaning on your historic request, can it use that behavior to change the level of risk associated with your current request to then enforce MFA, which provides a balance between security and convenience? So does anyone have adaptive? Consider that. Well, Mark, you should, in addition to this, role-based access control, remember, it's still least privilege, but that's still one, but we're on MFA. So in MFA, does anyone here use risk-based authentication? Did you know that Google Cloud, Amazon Web Services, and Microsoft, they allow you to enable additional capabilities that can review your previous requests, and if it's deemed risky behavior, it can stop you. It can deny you. So if you're not familiar with that, at the end of today's session, which is happening in several minutes, that's another word for it. It's called adaptive in the cloud, Mark. So if you don't have, think about this, a system that automates, remember, not a human logging in and performing behavior analytics, right, where they're going to use some business intelligence tool. No, something that is continuously monitoring, assessing your risk behavior. If identifies that over the last period of requests, which can be within that day, over the course of a week, if it's deemed risky, it can stop you. Think about it. If you don't know how to answer that, at the end, I will recommend some courses that will help you understand how you can implement that with Google Cloud, with AWS, with Microsoft Azure. Here's some other future trends that are MFA that are not zero trust. MFA that support passwordless authentication, blockchain. I'm sure you guys have heard of blockchain, right? For blockchain banking. There's even blockchain-based authentication that MFA supports. Ultimately, MFA improves your security posture. So here's a great question I have for you as I start to wrap things up and I bring us to our last one or two slides. Ready? If you're currently using Google Cloud, Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, using the chat window, can you post what cloud provider you're using? And if it's not one of those three, please let me know. What cloud provider you're using? Thank you, Norman. Thank you, Mark. None. Okay, Rhonda, MS. Anyone else? Any AWS? Any Google Cloud? Okay. So in any of all three, now that's multi-cloud. Good to hear, Jonathan. Talk about a contingency after contingency, right? So in any of these cloud providers, they provide a numerical score, everyone. Consider this, whether you're in cloud or not in cloud, the numerical score is what? A metric. And that numerical representation, like most metrics, is based on key performance indicators in terms of security. There are metrics on, ready, performance that's separate. There are metrics on, believe it or not, strictly compliance in terms of regulatory compliance. That is different. I'm talking about a security posture. All right. So there are built-in tools in Google Cloud. There are built-in tools in AWS. There are built-in tools with Microsoft that provide a security posture. And even if you're not using one of those three cloud leaders based on Gartner studies, this is what I recommend. Either adopting the cloud if you haven't done so already, or consider that you need some technology that is going to be able to review your logs, your events, just to make it very transparent and basic to all, where it can, utilizing that event history, provide a numerical score based on, ready, not what you deem as standard operating procedures, but a global standard that is also part of compliance, not just security, like ISO, like SOC, where if you have not, listen, implemented a security control, that means you actually haven't executed it, because if it was executed, it wouldn't come up in an event that it wasn't completed. So if you complete those security controls, you actually execute them, that your score, which starts with 0 in the beginning of the year, will improve, will increment slowly every time you implement a security feature. If you do not implement it, then that counts against you. Having a security posture in the form of a metric helps organizations be able to identify what security controls they have yet to execute, what security controls that are what? Think about it, backlogged, and each security control based on its impact to your industry, which varies, may be more impactful than others. So based on that, that score, the numerical score itself, should either be higher or lower based on its impact. This way, your organization can identify what outstanding security controls are most what critical to your organization based on their industry. Do you see where I'm going to with this? Now, because you're implementing it, ready? A security posture should be legible and understandable, not only to those in IT, but also, you got it, Mark, and this is a good example, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. You got it, buddy. So it is imperative that not only IT, but leadership can see that security posture. This way, everybody in the organization is aware of the current company's security posture. And there, and only then, can we all agree that the company is improving security. Thank you all for joining. I hope you enjoyed my powerful discussions on MFA and security. And I hope that you're aware that your journey has just begun. It doesn't end there. Do you remember I mentioned that there are some other courses? So in Sunset Learning, my good friend Carol is going to come online. Please don't disconnect, right? She's a great co-host, but we want you to be aware it's Cybersecurity Month. And we understand the importance of security. And we know that you're doing what you can, right, for your company, but to do better, right? Because in a security posture, there's always an opportunity to improve. Carol, are you available? Hello, Carol. Let me make sure her microphone might be on mute since we both had issues earlier. Carol? Yep, you're on mute, by the way. Well, I'll keep going then. As soon as she finds the mute button, we'll be fine. But we want you to be aware, everybody. First, thank you for joining in this free cybersecurity webinar. We've got more cybersecurity webinars with more experts that will be joining and sharing their experience and objective information and hope to drive awareness, right? And we've got cybersecurity quizzes. Have you guys taken some of those quizzes? If you haven't, listen, it's the holidays. Get an Amazon gift card. Come on. We know who you are. Get a gift card and do what? And give them out. Hey, I don't know about you, but my sister's niece's birthday went by, and I wish I had one of these gift cards because the item she wants is an Amazon Prime. So yes, there's cybersecurity quizzes that you can take. Go online, go to Sunset Learning, look up for the quiz, and you'll be able to take a quiz and, again, win that gift card. You know what? I'm starting to think, if you guys don't win the gift card, do we get the gift cards? Okay. You know what? Don't take the quiz so that way I get the gift card. Obviously, that's my attempt at joking. I'm military. My jokes are horrible. All right. Additionally, explore cybersecurity training programs, and they're designed for all skill levels. So if you're new to cybersecurity, or maybe you've heard of cybersecurity, right? You're great with Cisco technologies, but you want to learn more. You want to broaden your horizons. Like today, there was that discussion on API. There's a reason I selected that topic, everyone, because I actually write books for cloud and networking, and not a lot of people are aware of an API. And every time we hear it, I think the first thing that comes to mind, I don't know about you, is what? An application. That's it. But there's more to it, right? And especially from a security perspective. Imagine if your developer's telling you, hey, you don't need to secure the API, I will. There's a problem there. There's a problem there. So please, if you're not aware of certain things, skilling is there. We're here to help, okay? There's so much out there that we all, even me, can learn to continue to improve what? Our security posture. Did you know that we have a giveaway? Yeah. Sign up anytime in the month of October. By the way, it's the 21st. Next week's Halloween. Again, sign up anytime in the month of October for your chance to win a free Cisco security digital course. Come on. We all know you take that course, you get Cisco certified on security. That opens up what? Another door of opportunity in terms of what? Where you're at currently in employment, or what if you're looking for something new. So don't forget, visit our website, find out what you have yet to learn. That's it for me, everyone. Thank you all for joining and for participating in this 1 hour webinar. And Carol, I'm sure she's still trying to figure out what's going on with her mute button, and we do apologize. Thank you, everybody. I hope to see each and every one of you in another webinar. Take care. Hope to see you in another course as well.
If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and click on the notification icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.